Hi, I'm Simon K. Jones and you're listening to the audio version of Tales from the Triverse. This is The Heist, Part 2. And previously, the former SDC detectives are attempting to retrieve, or steal, a relic from a museum, ideally without being caught. Lunar Orbit, the New Roads Orbital Museum, 2550, March, Earth time. Lola was used to the ebb and flow of her wielding ability. Most of the time, even on Palinor, it was not there, and she felt like the same human she'd always been, as long as she didn't look too closely at her limbs. But when she trained, siphoning some of Darrela's wielding capacity, she felt enriched and born again as something greater and nobler and more dangerous than she'd been before. It had taken years of practice, but she could partially control the Vain-Ka physiology that had melded with her own, like tightening a leaky tap. She couldn't turn it off altogether, but she could reduce it to a trickle, such that she could touch Darrela without harming her, or shake the hand of another wielder, assuming they didn't recoil from her on sight. It was different for Yana. She'd been a wielder her entire life, and had spent most of it on Palinor, always tuned to her surroundings. Literally in her case, with her physiology skills always tapping into the earth and the air and the forces that made the universe tick. Each wielder's capability skewed in a particular direction, hence the specialisms, and Lola was only familiar with Darrela's micrology, which had proved hard enough for Lola to control. The idea of tapping into Yana's direct manipulation of physical forces seemed like a bad idea. Dragging Yana to mid-Earth and then to max-Earth was not unlike being blinded or deafened. Yana could still see, could still smell and hear, but had lost her wielding. A part of her was missing. Nevertheless, she'd insisted on coming along, to ensure that they found and retrieved the correct journal. "What if it's still locked away in a storage room?" Lola said quietly, as they moved through an exhibition hall arm in arm. The dresses provided by Justin were elaborate and luxurious, with Lola's leaving her mismatched limbs on display. The AI had noted that the less she looked like the photographic records of Detective Lola Stiles, the better. Yana walked the floor confidently as a princess of Palinor, causing not inconsiderable whiplash as she passed other guests. The most recent coverage of the museum had it on display. Yana said, "It's a major artifact, even if they have no idea how important it really is. It'll be here, somewhere." Lola couldn't work out how best to blend in with the other guests, and expected a uniformed London police officer to put their hand on her arm at any moment. She was acutely aware of her appearance, more so than when she was on Palinor. There was such a diversity of races and body types and dubious medical practices there that nobody looked twice at her surgery, her scars, her altered limbs. Max Earth had its own flavour of physical expression of the chrome variety, but it was more subtle, designed for fashion and utility rather than born from necessity. The speech was being pumped from the Parthenon to the hall they were in. Lola didn't recognise the voice, but she did know the name. "I'm Charles Matheson," the voice announced, over the hidden speakers, "and all of us here tonight, we're going to change the Triverse." "Matheson," she said under her breath. "Why have I heard that name?" Yana asked, then remembered. "You told us about him. In league with Baltine. He's here?" If Matheson was there, it could put the mission at risk. Would he recognise any of them? Lola had never met him as far as she could remember, and there were so many guests that there was no reason for them to be noticed, but they had all been on the Joint Council's wanted list for years. The speech continued to echo around the hall. "The history of civilization is about having it all, and throwing it away, over and over again. Egypt, Persia, Rome, the Mongol Empire, the Ottomans, Spain, Russia, the British, the Americans, China. Each time they ruled the world and then destroyed themselves. Rotted from within, went too fast or too slow, or gave themselves over to idiotic leaders. The same story plays out across the Triverse. Max Earth, Mid-Earth, Palinor." Lola glanced at Yana and rolled her eyes. This guy clearly liked the sound of his own voice. "But do you know what? I miss those days. For all the mistakes that were made. Let me tell you what's worse. What we have now. Or to be more specific, what we've lost. Back then, in the days of Empire, we at least were allowed to make our own mistakes, forge our own paths. Now? We have everything handed to us. The great AIs in the sky make all of our decisions, keep everything ticking along, make sure everyone is happy. We're a stagnant species. The Koth, the Ainfa, they're not governed by superintelligences. You could say they are ungovernable, perhaps, but that's besides the point. We humans, we built our cage and stepped willingly inside. I'm here, with my associates, to break the bars. I hope you'll all be a part of it. However much you can give, it all helps. It was about money then. He kept going, but Lola tuned him out, concentrating on the assortment of objects in the room. Some were on plinths, others in display cases. Paintings and carvings were hung on the walls, and across artistically positioned display panels. Above a door leading to an adjoining space was a plaque that read, "History of the Joining." The way was guarded by 2 officials with a makeshift VIP barrier preventing access. "That might be where we need to be," Lola said, nodding in its direction. "Have you seen this?" Yana said, her voice strained. "This is completely mislabeled." She pointed at a small, sculpted statue, about the size of Lola's forearm. "They say it's from the first Korath dynasty, but it's clearly not even from that region of Palinor. It's obviously a harvest blessing, depicting Illumet in an unusually good mood." "The god of disasters, right?" Yana shook her head and threw Lola a reproachful look. "God of elements, the harvest god, associated with natural disasters, but also with farming and plenty." Shrugging, Lola smiled apologetically. "I always get that one muddled up." Someone else interjected. "You know your Palinese pantheon?" It was the same voice as had been playing over the speakers. Charles Matheson was stood next to them. He took Yana's hand, lifted it to his lips and kissed it. "A pleasure to make your acquaintance. Charles Matheson, Max Earth Ambassador to the Joint Council, and more importantly, benefactor of this fine institution." Lola forced herself to breathe slowly, normally, keeping her expression neutral. Matheson picked up the statue and examined it more closely. "I'll have them fix the description." He passed Yana a small card. "Feel free to send me the preferred text and it'll be done by morning." A wide smile spread across his face, the sort of perfect, shining, white-toothed smile that only existed on Max Earth. "I'd simply send you my link, but I get the feeling neither of you are from around here." Yana curtsied slightly. "Princess Elena," she said, "of the Courtal Mist." Justin had provided each of them with new IDs. "Beautiful," Matheson said. "I've never been. Is it wonderful?" "It is. You should see it in Frostfall when the ice blooms on the slopes." Matheson turned to Lola, who was trying to ignore that he was hefting the ancient statue as if it were a baton. His eyes bore into her. It was possible that he'd seen a report on her history with the SDC, and being assigned to Brulia. Lola Stiles, the British liaison officer, who absconded with Princess Darila Baltine, who had betrayed Mid-Earth and the Kingdom of Great Britain. But there was no recognition. She'd changed enough over the years, or he cared little. "You are most interesting," Matheson said, looking her up and down and placing the statue back on its display. She smiled. "I loved your speech. How did you get in here so fast?" Matheson laughed and clapped his hands. "Oh, that was something I recorded earlier. Useful projection onto the stage. I've got better things to do tonight than try to remember my lines." He grinned and leaned in conspiratorially. "Speaking of which, ladies, what do you say to accompanying me into the VIP section? That's where all the best stuff is. Exclusive bar, too. I can show you my favourite cocktail." Lola glanced at Yana, who nodded. "Lead the way," Lola said, aware of the subtle pressure in the front of her dress, where the counterfeit journal was hidden. It was fortunate that Max Earth fashion was such that concealing pockets and objects was possible without breaking the line of the dress. He led them to the doorway, waved at the guards, and then they were through and into the history of the joining exhibition. It was fortunate that it had been her and Yana exploring this wing of the museum. It seemed unlikely that Matheson would have taken quite such an enthusiastic shine to Clark or Kaminsky. The room was somewhat smaller, but still crammed with objects and guests. Lola recognised odd relics of 18th century London, a withered umbrella, a beer mug, a preserved picnic hamper, an old Bow Street runner hat and whistle. The lighting in the room was designed such that there appeared to be a darkened portal in the centre. and on a gleaming plinth beneath it was a book illuminated by a spotlight. She recognised it even from a distance, from Jana's description and Justin's research. It was Kanemore's missing journal. Thanks for listening. You can leave comments and find lots more chapters over on the newsletter at simonkjones.substack.com.